Competition Act, the weightage is quite good given to this chapter. So we pay a little more attention. Though the weightage is more, I would not say the chapter is difficult. You have little more to remember. Otherwise, in fact, it's easier to remember. Competition Act, generally something which we observe also around us a lot. This is a very generic concept if I'm talking about competition. Everywhere we tend to come across some sort or the other sort of competition around us. So the concept is good. The only challenge is lot to remember. That's it. Otherwise, it's a good chapter, I would say. Okay, so the moment we talk about the competition, what is a concern? We're talking a lot about flexible, dynamic, and a competitive private sector. See, if I'm talking about this fight, this war of privatization and public sector, with the public, I think we almost know it very closely now. Because in Mumbai, since 2 days, these nationalized bank staff have gone for a strike because they are obviously against the privatization of the banks. Everything would have a plus and a minus. I would not say privatization is completely wrong or a completely right thing, because obviously everything comes with a baggage. So it might be good in some aspect, it is really not good in some aspect. So this challenge is always there, but ultimately we would see the moment I'm talking about a growth spurt in India specifically, we could witness the growth spurt all because of the privatization. Because still we had a privatization, the public sector was doing really very, very compromising growth. So we would not say, at least we could not witness that. Substantially, there was nothing which was visible to the eye for a layman. So here we're talking about the competitive private sector, and it is essential to foster a sustained economic development. As we are seeing only with the PSU, the development was at a compromised rate. With privatization, though, we have development. Obviously, things are going very high. If I'm talking about the inflation, if I'm talking about the day-to-day living, taxations, pricing of basic commodities, a lot of regulations have changed. Everything has changed. It comes with a mixed baggage. But ultimately, some growth we can see, witness as a layman also. So here we're looking to promote an effective competition, to focus on the efficiency, and it also improves the consumer welfare by offering a greater choice of higher quality products and services at lower prices. So here my concern of competition is what? I want to do something, I'm offering something better to a customer and at a lower price. So obviously in Competition Act, the customer welfare is a core concern, because we always revolve around the customer's concern, that the customers should be aware. We have a lot of initiatives to educate the customer, create awareness among the customers, because of which the government is also closely monitoring every movement of the market, that how exactly we have the advertisements, how are the promotions going on, what are the exact schemes coming up, maybe for investments or for FMCG, everything. The government is closely monitoring and also having the awareness campaigns regularly. So what exactly is a competition? If I say what is a competition, how do I say what is a competition? Because it is complex and a technical subject which does not lend itself to an easy summary or a concise clarification. I just cannot say that by doing this I'm creating competition. Supposedly, I'll give you an example. Here in my vicinity, I had a cake shop. It was doing really very, very well. Then one more person came, then one more person came. Now in one single lane, I have around 8 to 10 cake shops. This is what competition. It is good or it is bad. It is difficult to say, because all those 10 vendors are selling, are still there and managing the show. So somewhere they are having a good balance among themselves. Of late, with globalizations and opening the markets worldwide, it has become a subject of great practical importance. Because when I'm talking only about India, olden days of Indian economy, we were very, very concise. We were very, very concentrated. We were not looking to expand our horizon. We were not looking to go beyond the borders. Going beyond the borders, exports and imports were a task. A lot of technicalities were involved and it was a cumbersome process. It was not that smooth. But because of the globalization, people are having these minimum barriers when I'm talking about the geographical boundaries. And it is now, because of this, it is a great concern and it has got a lot of importance also. Because now if I'm talking about the online shopping, I can pick up any good from any country and there are options available. It can be delivered to me, right? So I'm not talking about India as a market. I'm talking about world as a market. So obviously competition will always have a crucial role to play, because I'm not competing with the Indian standards, I'm competing with the international standards now. Everybody has access to all the foreign brands. Competition can also be defined as a process of economic rivalry between the market players. And why are they doing this rivalry? Ultimately, they want to attract the customers. More the customers, it is better for the, obviously, the seller. So end of the day, if I have to put it in simple form, I would say competition is nothing but an economic rivalry, which is to gain the attention of the customer, which is to attract the customer, and obviously have a strong position in the market. How do we connect these two concepts? If I'm talking about the competition and the economic efficiency specifically, a number of studies have found a positive relationship when it comes to economic efficiency and my competition, innovation, productivity, growth ultimately. Some evidences show that strong competition is closely linked to the dynamic and efficient market. How do I say this? How do I prove this? With competition, I have a lot of dynamism, the markets are efficient, the products and services are efficient. How do I say that? The best example here would be, I'll give you the telecom, my favorite concept. When I'm talking about the telecom companies, every company has by and large a similar plan to offer. One person comes up. Nowadays, Jio is dominating the market by and large. So Jio comes up with a plan, then the Airtel will follow and Vodafone will follow. So this is how they are looking to maintain a strict competition. So almost everybody is looking to offer a similar palette to the customer and trying to retain the customers. Now, earlier days we had these small time general stores around our vicinities and we used to buy the groceries from there. Now almost every second person is coming up with a new app by which they want you to order your daily necessities at the convenience of your home. This is also in competition because they're looking to give you the assurance of a quality and the delivery also, time delivery. I'll tell you, I have seen people delivering early in the morning at 6 o'clock also, the essentials groceries. They come, this DMart or Big Basket or Sekari, all these people, they have got the time slots and they deliver you. Late in night at 11 o'clock also I've seen people delivering. So this is what? A competition. They're just looking to give the ease of access to the customer, and that's how they're trying to retain the customer. Competition policies cover a much broader set of instruments than only the law. So if I'm talking about the competition policy, I would not only stick myself to the competition laws, because obviously it has to have something more than that. Typically, it includes all the policies which are aiming at increasing the intensity of competition or rivalry in the local and national markets. And how are we doing that? How are we looking to control the rivalries? We are looking to lower the entry barriers and opportunities for harmful coordination to ensure that markets work effectively and serve the interest of all the citizens. Competition law is only a subset of nation's competition policy. So policy is a broader aspect. Competition law is just one of a subset of that. So competition policy will be overall targeting to increase the rivalry. Because of which we will have better players, we will have better options for the customers. And that's how we'll work on the efficiency and effectivity in the market. How do we see the background of Indian competition scenario? In Indian economy, the concept of competition remained a subject to control and regulation for several decades, because obviously Indian economy was tightly gripped. We did not have too much of flexibilities. We were not very customized when it comes to rules and regulations and policies. So we were always tightly controlled, such as my industrial licensing or foreign exchange restrictions, my small scale industry protections, control on the foreign investments, technologies, quantitative restrictions on import, administered pricing, control on the capital issues. There were a lot of things which were tightly monitored, prohibited, controlled by the government when it comes to licensing or the small scale industries. Now, in past few years, we have seen a good initiative when it comes to Startup India. Almost every fourth or fifth person is coming up with some idea. They want to have their own startup. They're looking to get into the business. People are shifting their focus again from job to business. This is all thanks to my Startup India initiative. A lot of benefits are given. Of course, there would be problems also attached to that. But these people are thinking on those lines again. They want to break that format of corporate job and they want to live with a flexibility in their life. So licensing processes or the SME segment, small and medium enterprises, or I'm talking about the foreign exchange management, or I'm talking about the restrictions on the exports and imports, or I'm talking about the control on the foreign investments. FDI was a task. Buying technology from a foreign country was a task. There were a lot of restrictions on imports also. There was a lot of problems when it comes to capital issues. All these have been handled gradually, and gradually we see there is a good positive movement in these aspects, and because of which obviously we have a better competition. Now in India we have IKEA. Almost all the good brands of the across the world have some or the other presence in India, directly or indirectly. Either they are directly here or they have got the foreign collaborations. So which is also a good thing for a country like India, because we are no more developing, we are almost in the phase of developed country. Okay, so in the late 80s and the earlier 90s, a need of liberalization was felt and a range of policies and regulatory reforms were initiated. So this was basically felt in India in the late 80s and early 90s. That's how we realized we need to come up with some policies by which we open the gates. We become more liberal. In our own country, we let people do businesses in a more flexible format. We are being very, very rigid when it comes to issuing licenses, or we were very rigid when it comes to handling the small scale segment, because small scale segment had a lot of issues. The most important task was the capital and the technology. These two were the biggest problem they faced, and there was absolutely no support given to them specifically for these two aspects. With the growing recognition, the government also focused on these problems, and definitely we had a lot of policies, frameworks which were initiated, such as delicensing of the industries, shrinking the monopoly of the public sector, because public sector was highly monopolized. Nobody ever had a chance to enter the segment, because of which obviously the hands were tied of the private sector. They could not explore much because they had a limited options, limited varieties in the platter. Other than those were the strategic and security concerns dominated. Obviously, if I'm talking about the country like India, still a lot of things are still with the public sector only, and we are not thinking of privatization of that. Removal of the quantitative restriction on the import, market determined exchange rates, liberalization of the foreign direct investments. Now if I'm saying IKEA has opened a store, FDI is so common, so many sectors have got almost 100% FDI, which is a very good movement. Initially we had a lot of restrictions when it comes to FDI, or in FDI also, if I want to raise the money from individual investors or institutional investors, it was a task. Now it is becoming more and more easier for outside world to approach India for investments, for businesses, for transactions. Reduction in the small scale industry reservations. A lot of things were really reserved when I'm talking about the small scale industry segment or handicraft. These industries had limited exposure, limited scope, and the entry was also very difficult. But now government has made it really very, very simpler. Or liberalizing my financial market, my capital market reforms, and much greater role for the private sector in the infrastructure industry. So if we are talking about the infrastructure basically got its boom from the private sector only, because specifically in infra, the public sector had a very minimum role to play, or it wasn't significant at all, because still it was public sector who was handling it. The infra of the country was very compromised. But because of the privatization, we can see there is so much of development. At least in the city of Mumbai, I can see flyovers around me everywhere. I've got so many metro stations coming up. I've got so much of better access. Now they're also working on the water transportation, which again will be a good thing, obviously, for future transportation and communications. So here we would say private sector has given a good boom to my power, my port, my transports, and my communications. Because obviously, if I remember my childhood days when we only had the MTNL, or we had this BSES electricity, whenever the light is out, it is out for at least 2 to 4 hours or 6 hours or whatsoever. There is absolutely no chance it will come back in half an hour or 1 hour. But because of the private sectors, I know the bills are rising. Obviously, we are made to pay more, but at least we get the services. If my light is gone, I'll just make a complaint, and at least here in a place like Mumbai, I am in western suburbs. In my area, it does not go in first place, and even if it is going, it is restored within maximum 2 hours. Generally, if there is something which is not a big failure, with general courses, it is handled within that much of time frame, which is a big relief, right? Because obviously the money also matters, that I'm paying more for this private services, but I get the continued seamless services. That's also a good thing. I do not have the hassle of every now and then the power cuts, right? So which is a good thing. Or I'm talking about the MTNL phone connections. It was a task because of the mobiles, because of the connectivity. It is so easier. So obviously private players have contributed a lot positively also to the economic growth. Now let's understand how we evolved our competition law. The first Indian competition law was 1969, and it was known as Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act, which was known as MRTP Act. MRTP Act was found from the genesis of Article 38 and 39 of Constitution of India. So if I'm talking about this monopolistic and restrictive trade practices, this is how we are looking to control the competition. We are not looking to have any monopoly, or we are not promoting any restrictive trade practices. What was the background of this act? This MRTP bill was introduced in the parliament in the year 1967, which after being referred to the Joint Select Committee, it became an act and came into force on the 1st June of 1970. So what are the principal objectives, or I'll talk about the preamble. Preamble is why the act was created, preamble of that. So focuses on the prevention of concentration of economic power to the common detriment. So obviously, I would not say the power should not be concentrated, because there are so many areas wherein the power is concentrated, but it should not bring any problem to a common man. So it should not be detrimental to the interest of a common man. We need to have some control on the monopolies. We cannot deny the monopoly. Monopoly would be there, but we need to have some control on the monopoly. Why we need to have some monopoly? Is monopoly a good thing? How do we say there has to be some monopolies in the market? So the market keeps going, market keeps growing. Somebody is doing something good. Why do we have monopoly? Because somebody has put in a lot of effort in the research and development. Because of a tremendous research and development, they come up with something good, something unique, something different. And that's how monopolies gets created. And specifically for a country like India, we do not have any great initiative, great effort towards this research and development department. We always lag behind in that. Till date, we rely on the Western countries for the developments, inventions, discoveries, and we are happy to copy that. Because for us to get into some creation, get into some experiments, get into research, it's a task still. Maybe we still have challenges when it comes to managing our resources. So here we need to have monopolies. That's not a problem, but there has to be reasonable control on the monopolies. Then prohibition of monopolistic trade practices. I am not looking to promote a lot of monopoly in the trade. There also has to be a restriction on a restrictive trade practices. How do we prohibit these restrictive trade practices? And how do we differentiate? What do I mean by this monopoly? And what do I mean by restrictive trade practice? Is there a difference, or these two are similar? Let's understand. What exactly is the scheme of this act? Prevention of any undesirable concentration of economic power was sought to be achieved essentially through the regulation of growth of the undertaking of a particular size. Maybe any undertaking which has the assets of not more than 100 crores. So these business houses were officially designated large business houses. Undertakings which have a sizable share of the market, or a licensed production capacity of more than 1/4 of the total production, or the installed capacity, were described as a dominant undertakings. So there were some ways of classifying the undertakings, because a classification is required. No, when you're looking to control the monopoly, when you're looking to control the market or regulate the market movement, you need to understand what are the classifications, how a person is dominating, how a monopoly is getting created. So if a particular business house has assets of more than 100 crores of value, then obviously we generally put them in a particular class, a particular category. Or when a business house has more than 1/4 of production, 25% of production capacity or installed capacity, then also they would be known as a dominant undertaking. These are the large business houses. They are dominating the market because obviously they are huge in size and production. These companies were declared as large business houses if the assets value of more than 1 crore or more. So here we have different classifications given to different companies on the basis of business, on the basis of assets, investments. Then obviously whenever we have an act, we would be looking to evolve it on a regular basis. So we had to amend this act in 91. The new industrial policy, which was announced by the government in Parliament on 24 June 1991, sought to amend the MRTP Act of 1969 by removing all the pre-entry restrictions and placing the emphasis on controlling and regulating these monopolistic, restrictive and unfair trade practices. So here now, after the amendment, my focus is more on the monopolistic practices, restrictive practices and unfair trade practices. So here I am looking to put my focus on these three affairs of the market. Then the section 3 of the MRTP Act provides that unless the central government by notification in the official gazette directs, the act will not apply to any undertaking which is owned and controlled by the government company, a corporation, a registered society or an undertaking, management of which has been taken over by the central government. So ultimately from the preview of this act, we are looking to exclude all the government entities, the trade unions and the other associations of the workmen and the financial institutes, because if I'm looking for certain exclusions, we are looking to remove all the central government entities, trade unions, associations of workers, financial institutes. Then let's understand what are these monopolistic trade practices. What is monopoly? The word monopoly has not been clearly defined in this act, but the common knowledge says the monopoly as well as monopolistic trade practices or the monopolistic position leads to distortion of competition in the market. So the competition is not healthy, the competition is not in equity because there is a distortion. Somebody has something more, somebody has very disadvantaged position. Besides endangering in the normal circumstances, concerted actions to fix prices, supplies of commodities, etc. The result of such action is no doubt detrimental to the consuming public. So here, whatever are the trade practices, somebody is trying to fix up the prices, somebody is looking to fix up the supplies of the commodities, whatever are the ways and means, but ultimately the outcome of these practices is nothing but something which is against the public benefit, something which sacrifices the public benefit. See, if I'm talking about these practices, sometimes what happens, these suppliers, they create artificial demand of their products or services. They create this artificial demand because suddenly they're looking to have a growth in that, they have a lot of production, and how do they clear it? So they create an artificial demand. And how do they create that? Sometimes they create a false scarcity. Sometimes they create some hype through some advertisements, some social media platforms, or they have some brand ambassadors. There are different ways and means by which obviously they can do that. And why do they do that? Because suddenly they want to have a boost in their sales. They want to have a boost in the customer database. And these are not always good for the public. Sometimes it is really against the interest of the common man in a large scale. Then what are these restrictive trade practices? One of the object of the prohibition of restrictive trade practices was the concern of this MRTP Act. In order to ensure that benefits of free and fair competition in a market reaches the ultimate consumer, it is essential that the process of competition should not be distorted by any trade practice, either by a single manufacturer or group of manufacturers or dealers. So here, what are these restrictive trade practices? Any trade practice because of which the free and fair competition is not available to the people in the market. Maybe a single manufacturer, a group of manufacturers or dealers, anybody who hampers that. That practice would be known as a restrictive trade practice, because end of the day we want a free and flow movement of goods and services in the market, and that is hampered by some of the activities. The commission lists out certain types of these restrictive trade practices, and these are not only in India but in other countries also. They are followed. Based on that, the commission picked up some activities. Primarily, it is a horizontal fixation of prices, or sometimes I have a vertical fixation of prices, or a resale price maintenance, allocation of markets between the purchasers. See, these are different types of the marketing strategies companies come up with. And why do they come up with these strategies? Because ultimately they want to stir the moment of the product or the service. They want to create curiosity and obviously ultimately attract the customers. So if I want to put up the price, maybe horizontally, so in a particular area, in a particular segment, or in a particular zone, the prices are same throughout. Or for a particular product, prices are same throughout the country. So maybe horizontally or vertically, I'm looking to fix up the prices. Or there is a resale price maintenance. Whenever something is resold, something is coming up in the second-hand market, the prices also needs to be maintained to a particular level. Or I'm looking to allocate the markets between the purchasers. Supposedly, if I want to say allocating the market based on the purchasers, so what I would say, I would talk about the individuals, residents or commercials, corporates, or I'm talking about the middle class or higher middle class or very poor segment. There are different ways to classify. Or discrimination between the purchasers. I'm looking to discriminate the purchasers. See, everybody says in in Mumbai people have this taste, so they will be buying this. Or when you go to Pune, the taste is different. In Maharashtra only, but different cities have a different preference. People pick up things differently. They have a different taste. Okay, so maybe we are looking to discriminate between certain purchasers, or maybe there is a boycott. People are looking to boycott, or the supplier only boycott the particular market or the particular purchasers, or exclusive dealing contracts. Sometimes what the people do, supposedly I am the one, I have got some agency. Maybe let's take example of biscuit agency, Britannia. I've got a Britannia biscuit agency. Now my concern is, as a wholesaler, I need to reach to as many retailers as possible. Then only I will have a rolling of my products. So it is in my interest that I go and keep visiting a particular area, meet all the dealers, all the retailers, and start supplying my biscuits to them. Now, exclusive dealing contracts are what? Whenever I go to a particular area, what I say, see, for this Mumbai region, I am the one who's supplying. You can pick up any other segment and you can start supplying there. So you don't enter my area, I'll never enter your area. So two suppliers generally divide the areas based on different factors. The most common are the geographical factors, geographical boundaries. And then they start dealing in those contracts according to exclusivity. So nobody interferes in anybody's area and they are dealing in there peacefully. Sometimes we have the tie-up arrangements. So what I would say, all the dealers of Maharashtra will get the products from this particular person, and everybody from Surat or Gujarat will get from here, or Rajasthan will have one particular place. So I'm looking to have these tie-up arrangements between the dealers. So instead of having a competition, fighting against each other, they fight together with each other. And because they are fighting together with each other, what is the problem in the long term? The customer suffers, because then it is no more a customer's market, it is a supplier's market. Okay, so all these arrangements have its own plus and minus. Then let's see what are these unfair trade practices. In trade and commerce, unfair trade practices are very common. Even in the olden days also, we have traces of those unfair trade practices. Priests in Sumeria and Babylon are on record to have lent money to the needy at a high rate of interest. This I think we have seen in India also. Almost every Hindi movie in the olden days, Bollywood has shown us enough that people were given the money at a very exorbitant rate, and then their land and their house was taken by those money lenders, and they were very brutal in dealing with those people. So these are the common stories which we have been hearing, because people are in need of money right now, and I want to put something to mortgage, or I want to take some loan against some property, some security, and people generally take undue advantage of the situation, because nothing was regularized, nothing was formalized. With passage of time, now everybody has access to financial system, everybody can go and raise some loan for itself. So because of which situations are changing a bit, but still we have a long way to go. The underlying objective of such legislative endeavors has been to make the behavior at marketplace conducive to the righteous dealings so that the ultimate customer gets a fair deal. Whatever is the practice, howsoever the dealers, the manufacturers, the suppliers are dealing, whatever contracts they have, whatever arrangements they have, ultimately it should not bring any adversity to the customer. The customer should not be at a disadvantageous position. I'll give you the example of these Lays. Lays had come up with some baked Lays some few years back. They came with a new variant saying this is purely baked. It is not fried. So it is healthy, it is good. And that time I think the cricket season was also going on. So they were promoting it in a very, very aggressive manner. Suddenly after a few months, and obviously I have a daughter, she got addicted to that. And being a babe, you have no guilt also. So she's like, no, I want to have that only. And she actually got addicted to that. So now after a few months, I was searching for those Lays almost all of my area I covered vicinity, but I could not find it anywhere. Then I asked one person that what is the problem, why the Lays are not available anywhere, these baked ones. So he's like, yeah, the baked ones are not available, it is not in production. Some reason he gave me, which is obviously not satisfactory. And then he said, instead of that, I have got a new flavor now, why don't you try that? So one is what the Lays company itself is promoting. PepsiCo itself is promoting some other product. So they want to put this off shelf and promote some other product because they're giving a different option to the customer. So when I don't get what I want, then obviously I'll be looking for options. Or second thing is, maybe this is deliberately done by some competitor to spoil the market. So what they're doing, they're looking to get in the tie-up arrangements with those dealers. And they don't put the products of PepsiCo on the shelf. Instead, they give them the options. Because this is generally a human mentality, not only Indian mentality. When I also go to a particular departmental store and I'm looking to buy something, if I don't get my brand, I will look for it for 1 minute or 2 minutes. Next thing I do is I look for option. Because it is difficult to go for 1 or 2 items again and again. So whatever is next available, we generally pick up those options. So here the concern is also the same, that there should not be anything in the market that is ultimately not fair for the customer. The customer is at a disadvantaged position. How do we protect the customer? So obviously we have lot of laws for the protection of customers. The dominant one was Consumer Protection Act of 1986. Obviously it was framed necessary rules thereunder for facilitating the formation of consumer protection councils, setting up of consumer forums at district levels, state commissions at state level, and national commission at national level. And why do we have these commissions? To handle the grievances. Whatever are the problems, whatever are the complaints of the customers, that should be handled at these different bodies so appointed. So protection of consumer is always a concern, and this Consumer Protection Act specifically focuses on that. Then obviously the government also doing a lot. So a lot of committees were instituted. A lot of committees were formed to discuss this issue and how do we improve the situation. So here we had a Sachar committee. The government of India appointed in 1977 under the chairmanship of Justice Rajinder Sachar to look into the simplification of the working of the Companies Act and the MRTP Act. Because Mr. Justice Rajinder Sachar was the one who was presiding, the committee was known as the Sachar Committee. And in 77 it was formulated and the committee submitted a report in the year 78. As far as recommendations pertaining to the MRTP Act are concerned, far-reaching changes were suggested by the committee. For the first time, the committee highlighted the need for introduction of suitable provisions to curb the unfair trade practices. By 78, we realized for the first time that we need to have certain regulations, certain rules that will reduce the unfair trade practices, because this is really very, very significant and people are at a disadvantaged positions. Because if I'm talking about the farmers, till date, we hear a lot about the farmer suicides, miseries of farmers. Lot of every now and then in the small towns from rural India we get these news only, and which is highly unpleasant to our ears. So somewhere the government has to take up some initiative, come up with some ideas, some regulations, some laws, and obviously they are constantly doing something or the other. Effectivity ultimately would depend on a lot of factors. Execution is always a task. Planning is never. Okay. And when there is a mismatch in execution and planning, obviously then we have the problem, and obviously the rules are also very ineffective. After Sachar committee, we had a Raghavan committee. As the India was moving steadily on the path of reforms, which comprised of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. So it did away with the MRTP Act of 1969. It was almost felt as obsolete. It no longer served the purpose because now we are more liberalized. We're working with the more of privatization sector and we're working at a global level. So our act had already outlived its utility. It was almost obsolete. So the control of monopoly was not appropriate to support the growth aspirations of more than 1 billion Indians. Indeed, a need was felt to promote and sustain the competition in the market. So now we are not thinking to remove the competition. In fact, now we are thinking we need to have some better measures to promote and sustain a healthy competition, because now we are not thinking competition is bad or we should not have a competition. Now we are thinking it has shifted because we are working on a global platform now. We are in a more liberalized environment now. So our concern is competition should be there, but it should be in a healthy, positive manner. So we have this Competition Act of 2002. The Competition Act provides that no enterprise or association of enterprises or person or association of person shall enter into any agreement in respect of production, supply, distribution, storage, acquisition or control of goods or provision of services which is causing or likely to cause an appreciable adverse effect on competition. As I gave you the various examples, normally dealers, suppliers, manufacturers, or the retailers, they normally get into some or the other arrangements among themselves. And any such arrangement, whatever brings adversity to the competition in the market, would be prohibited. Obviously, would not be sustained. Then the section 3 subsection 4 says that any agreement which is among the enterprise or the person at different stages or levels of production chain in different markets may be about production, supply, distribution, storage, sale, price, or trade in goods or provision of services, including the tie-in agreements. Tie-in, people have the tie-ups that, I'll be doing this and you do that. Exclusive supply, I'll only be supplying for this particular segment. I'll only supply to this particular area and I will not go beyond that. Exclusive distribution, my distribution network is only for the state of Maharashtra, city of Mumbai, and I'm not going beyond that. So I have certain exclusive distribution agreements. Or I refuse to deal. Obviously, when I'm talking about the exclusivity, I refuse to entertain anybody else. Or resale price maintenance. If a retailer buys something from me, that case I'm looking to dominate the pricing at which my goods will be sold. So I not only dominate the price at which I am selling, but I am also looking to dominate the price at which others are selling my products or services. So this is what? This is again a resale price maintenance, and in long run it only brings adversity to the market and competition, and ultimately customer bears the burnt. Then the section 4 of the Competition Act expressly prohibits any enterprise or group from abusing its dominant position, meaning thereby a position of strength which is enjoyed by an enterprise in the market, which enables it to operate independently of the competitive forces which are prevailing in the relevant market. In my market, I already have a lot of competition, but still I am operating independently. I am not fearful of anything and nothing affects my business or affects its competitors or consumers or the relevant market in its favor. Maybe I am not affected by others. One. Second is nobody affects me. So whatever I am doing, I am maybe confident enough or I am large enough. So nothing in the market affects me at all. And I am operating independently, irrespective of number of people or segments. Let's understand what are the combinations